Hello and welcome back to the Matrix Green Pearl podcast. I'm your host, Hilmarie Hutchison, and today I'm joined by a guest whose journey spans continents, industries, and innovation. Joe Whitehead is the Managing Director at Avenue2, a premier luxury events company redefining the standards of bespoke experiences in the region. With over 20 years of experience in marketing, PR, consultancy, and entertainment, Joe's career has taken him from London's oil and gas sector to founding multiple successful ventures in Dubai and London. Joe, welcome and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's start from the beginning. Can you share a little bit about your background and how your global journey brought you to the luxury events space in Dubai?
Yeah, so I started out in London after I finished university. I originally wanted to be a pilot. I had got sponsorship from British Airways, and the plan was to go to university sponsored by the airline and then be a pilot. And unfortunately, in 2001, September 11th happened and the whole airline industry sort of fell into shock and all the sponsorships were pulled. So I went ahead and did the degree anyway, just without then going on to do the pilot training. So I came out of university not entirely sure what to do. I fell into this strange job working for a pump manufacturer. When I went for the interview, I was thinking along the lines of swimming pools and that sort of thing. I wasn't thinking sort of massive oil and gas industrial style pumps, but that's what they did. For one reason or another, I did very well in the interview and got the job and immediately then started traveling. So my job was marketing, covering Europe, Middle East and Africa. So I was traveling around a lot around Europe. The first trip to Dubai, I was immediately offered a transfer. And so 2007, I came out here and started that oil and gas career. I think I stayed here about 7 years with a couple of different companies. That's how I ended up in the Middle East.
Interesting, because in 2007 is when I also arrived in Dubai. So we have that in common.
Oh, okay. It's funny how many people say the same thing. 2007 seems to be one of those years. I guess it's because it was pre the global financial crisis. So that was when Dubai was really booming and everybody wanted to move here and there was plenty of money. And then obviously 2008, everything fell apart and a load of people had to leave.
Absolutely. And all those cranes, 75% of the world's cranes was in Dubai at the time. I just remember that. It was quite crazy in JBR and those areas.
It was really impressive. That was one of the things I liked when I first came over here. They were still building the Burj Khalifa. It was almost finished, although back then it was the Burj Dubai. The whole city just had this amazing energy about it.
So then you had this successful corporate career working for these different companies. What was it that then inspired you to take the leap into entrepreneurship?
I was essentially forced. So 2015 was another crash, but it was the oil price crash. So that was the first time in quite a while that the oil price went below $50 a barrel. And, it had gone from, I think it was 130 or 140, and then rapidly dropped down below below 50. The company I was working for at the time panicked and made a lot of people redundant, including me. It was an American company and they very often see sort of well-paid Western expats. We've all got a target on our back, essentially. So I started at that point looking for other corporate jobs. And then I just decided that actually I'd had enough of that idea and I wanted to go into business for myself because I didn't want to be beholden to other people or, kind of other people's mercy anymore.
Yeah, that makes absolute sense. So, wow, what a ride. From wanting to be a pilot and your plans derailed because of 9/11, and then being in a very good job that you really enjoyed, that you were doing well in. Again, plans derailed because of oil and gas industry crashing. So what was your vision then behind Avenue2 when you launched it? How has that evolved as the company has grown?
Yeah, I was kind of left in a bit of a quandary at that point, and I wasn't quite sure what to do next. And my fiance at the time worked in PR, and I think she was equally fed up with working for other people, and she wanted to start her own company, and she had a fairly unique idea about that. So at that point, we went into business together. We started a company called Secret PR. That went extremely well. It was very popular. It was a kind of PR company for PR companies, essentially. So we would offer support for PR companies that didn't need necessarily full-time staff, but they needed support on projects. And then off the back of that, we then started another PR company that was dedicated to the legal industry, which did very well. But then another crisis came along. That relationship didn't last. And so when the relationship fell apart, the business, obviously, then we had to go our separate ways. But it was a really interesting time working in PR, understanding that industry. And essentially, that was my sort of first foray into entrepreneurship. When that business came to a close, that was 2017, I think. So that was the point I decided to move back to London and get into consulting. So staying in the sort of entrepreneurial spirit, but focusing back on oil and gas again. So I went back to all my old contacts and started working again with them, consulting. But then weirdly, that took a strange turn and I ended up in the tobacco industry, or more specifically, the vaping industry. It's an unusual, unexpected turn. But again, that was going very well. And the next sort of crisis that came along was COVID, obviously. So the business was going well. The subsidiary of British American Tobacco that I was working for was one of the largest companies in Lloyd's Development Capital's portfolio. And Lloyd's Development Capital had recommended me to several other companies. So that consultancy was really about to take off. And then obviously when COVID came along, that just completely killed it. Everybody panicked. Nobody really knew what was going on at that time. So yeah, that was another sort of unexpected turn that forced me to look at other options.
My goodness, you really jumped around a lot. As I mentioned earlier, from wanting to be a pilot into oil and gas, into PR companies. Again, even there, you tried your hand at different things in the PR industry. Then back to London, back to consulting. But at this point, you were your own boss because you're now a consultant for various industries, oil and gas, vaping, and then, of course, another crisis hit. So what was the next step for you?
Well, COVID was rather strange. So I had just qualified as a volunteer police officer in London's Metropolitan Police at that point. And so the first few months, I thought, well, the police force was really struggling because a lot of people were being sent home to quarantine. Because again, nobody knew how dangerous COVID was at that point. So I did lots of volunteer work for the police from February through till probably the end of the summer. But then it didn't look like the COVID problem was going away. And I thought I can't really justify living in London and spending all this money living in London when there's not really much work going around. So at that point, I just looked at where would be the cheapest place I can go with my laptop and just set up a kind of remote office and do the whole digital nomad thing. So I found that Thailand was essentially completely closed down. But if you could get in and you could, do the PCR tests and all the sort of quarantine requirements, once you were in the country, you were free to move around. And it was incredibly cheap. So I was living on a 5-star hotel resort on the beach, food included, and it was costing me, I think it was about $25 a day. And they had Muay Thai lessons and paddle boards and kayaks that you could borrow. So yeah, that's what I did. And I stayed out there probably for about a year during COVID.
Very clever idea. I mean, why not? Since you couldn't move around anyway, it was really smart to decide where can I be that I can work remotely and actually enjoy the surrounds. I mean, I think it was a really clever idea.
It was trying to make the best of a bad situation, I suppose, and I think I achieved that.
And then how long were you in Thailand for?
Well, it was on and off for probably 18 months. I spent some time in France as well. It was, let's say, 12 months over an 18-month period I was living in Thailand.
So are we at Avenue2 yet, or there's still something else to come?
Well, so once COVID sort of started to die down and it looked like Dubai was opening up again, I made the decision to come back to Dubai. And at that point, I thought I wasn't really sure. I was a bit shell-shocked or a bit gun-shy, let's say, from the couple of bad experiences I'd had working for myself. And I thought, well, maybe it's time to go back and look at the corporate world again. So I spoke to some friends in Dubai and said I was coming back. And at that point, they're artists over here and they asked if I wanted to manage them. So I thought, well, this is different territory for me. I've never done that before. I've never worked in entertainment. I said, sure, we'll give it a go. So I came over here, started managing them. And then just through that, really found that I enjoyed the entertainment industry. I enjoyed the freedom, the hours that you work. I mean, sometimes it's very long hours and sometimes you work very late, but you manage your own time. And I just found I really clicked with the industry. And so that was really the impetus behind setting up Avenue2.
From being a bit gun shy, as you said, to looking for something, maybe to work for someone else, to actually be directed back into running something for yourself. I love that you said you had the freedom to set your own schedule, which is fantastic when you're an entrepreneur. What was the vision behind Avenue2 when you launched it, and how has that evolved as the company has grown?
Honest answer is that when I set it up, there really wasn't a vision. I just knew that I enjoyed the industry. I was meeting some really interesting people and some very nice people. And I knew that it was an industry that I wanted to be in. So when I set the company up, I registered it for every possible activity, whether it's putting on stage shows, managing artists, running corporate events, catering. I just put everything on the license because I wanted to give myself the scope for Avenue to become, whatever it would become. But the reality is there was no clear vision at that time. And it's taken probably the best part of a year trying different things, working with different people to end up with a clear vision of what we want Avenue to be. Although, we're still very much still on that journey.
Excellent. So now you've had it for some time. What is your vision for it now?
The vision is very clear. I'm not going to give all the details at this point because we've got a sort of 5 to 10 year roadmap and we want to keep some surprises for people down the road. But essentially, we want to become the industry standard for events, not just in the Middle East, but ultimately globally. And, we're very focused on changing the way that certain things are done. I think I've only been in the industry for 2 years now, but I've seen a lot of problems, a lot of issues with the way that people do things, inefficiencies, and certainly in terms of environmental sustainability, there's a lot of issues, the way events are done. And we want to try and change that and essentially completely change the industry, which I don't think would be that hard. I think people just haven't really tried to do it before.
Wow, that's quite a lofty vision, something really big that you're aiming at. So you certainly have a vision now, something that you're targeting. Now, Avenue2 is known for delivering high-end luxury events. What do you think sets your team apart in such a competitive industry?
So I think the key for us is essentially it's honesty and not being afraid to say no and not compromising. So we probably, I think it's fair to say, we turn down more work than we accept. And that's because either the budgets aren't right and we know that for their budget we can't deliver the quality of event that we want to deliver, or the client doesn't seem like a good fit. And rather than have a sort of awkward and difficult working relationship, we just say, actually, maybe we'll recommend a different agency to you. So I think that's probably where we differentiate ourselves, because it is a very competitive industry and most people will do absolutely anything to make the sale, but we're just not comfortable taking jobs on where we don't think we can do the best possible job. And if we do take on a client, we are brutally honest with them. If we think they're making a mistake, if we think that what they are asking for doesn't make sense for some reason, we just tell them, because it's much easier to have a small, maybe slightly difficult discussion about that now than get to the night of the event and we haven't pointed out that something could potentially go wrong, and then it goes wrong and then we would get the blame. So, it's much easier to be honest upfront, I think. So I think that's probably the main differentiator with us.
I love that too, that you are willing to not just take on everything. And as you say, in such a competitive market, often people are just price shopping and going after who's got the lowest bid. And that ends up just being a race to the bottom. And that's not the client or not the right fit for what you're offering. So that you have set those standards for yourself and for your team. I love that.
Yes, it means we turn down business sometimes, but very often I find that client will come back later for their next event. They'll have gone with the cheaper option. The event will have been a complete disaster. And then they increase their budget and they come back to us next time and say, hey, can you do our next event? And then we go and do it properly. And then that way the client respects you. They know that you can deliver a good service. And that's the start of what would, hopefully be a decades-long relationship.
Absolutely. Sometimes people just have to bump their heads to realize which is the right way to go. So as an entrepreneur in what's ranked the second most stressful industry in the world, how do you manage the intense pressure while still staying focused on innovation and growth?
There isn't actually that much pressure in the industry if you plan things properly. So what we pride ourselves on is anticipating in advance anything that could potentially go wrong, so that when we get to the night of the event, although yes, it might be a long day, there might be long hours, in theory, we've got all our bases covered and very seldom does anything actually go wrong. And if something does go wrong, we know exactly how to fix it. And, it's resolved in minutes and usually before the client's even noticed. So I don't actually find that the pressure is that hard. Obviously, there's the ongoing pressure of, there's bills to pay, there's staff to pay. And so, you have to make sure that your pipeline is full of work. And again, it's finding that balance of which jobs do you turn down and which jobs do you accept. But in general, it's not too much of a challenge to find that balance.
That's really excellent. So you are able to reduce the stress through your careful planning and through identifying potential issues in advance, or even rectifying issues even before the client notices them. And in that way, reducing the amount of stress that's on you and your team. You sort of mentioned it earlier on about sustainability. We know that sustainability is a growing theme in many industries and also in luxury experiences at events. How is Avenue2 integrating sustainable practices into its work without compromising on creativity or excellence?
Well, this was one of the first things I noticed when I got into this industry, was just the sheer amount of waste. So typically a client will hire an event space. It could be a ballroom in a hotel or an auditorium or something, but typically there's not much in the way of AV equipment or anything else installed. So it's usually just an empty shell. Then it's up to the client to bring in the lights, to build the stage, to put carpets down, to put up any other structures that they want, any kind of advertising or branding. And, a lot of this stuff is single use. So there'll be timber frames covered in plasterboard and plaster, and then that's painted, and then they have graphics put on. All of that at the end of the event goes in the skip. It's the same with all the carpeting. So, the stages are usually reusable, but all the carpeting that goes down is typically single-use carpet, and it's all covered in plastic. And at the end of the event, it all goes in the bin. That didn't sit very well with me. It's a waste of money, as far as I can tell. The clients are spending enormous amounts of money on an event that potentially lasts 1 or 2 hours, or, maybe a day, but that's about it. I just thought that was very wasteful. So this is one of the big things that Avenue2 is challenging in the industry. So there's a few ways we can do that. The first is avoiding physical, let's say, sort of wood or plasterboard or plastic totems that are single use. It's much better to use a digital screen or a digital display, that same information out. And sometimes I think it can look a lot better because obviously it can be animated, which it wouldn't be if it was a physical structure. And the other thing is to work with venues, which is what we're doing now. We have several venues around Dubai that we're working with to install all the lighting, sound, screens that you may need for any events. And that way, when the client comes to rent the venue, everything that they need is there, or let's say at least 95% of what they need is there. So what that means is you don't then have dozens of people coming in, several trucks, polluting the atmosphere, bringing all this stuff in, doing all this work to put these screens and lights and sound in, only to take it back out a few hours later. Everything you need is there. That's what I was talking about earlier in terms of how we want to change the industry for the better. Because I think once that starts to catch on and people realize that it's cheaper and better and more sustainable, I think that's going to be the only way people go.
I think that's really, really excellent, to avoid the use of and the waste of materials like plastics, going the digital route. And also, I think it's really smart, as you say, working with specific venues to make sure that they have the equipment in place, so you're not moving and bringing things in and throwing things out all the time. I think that's a really smart move, and I can see how that can be transformational in the industry that has operated so wasteful in the past. Really, really excellent. What are some of the most memorable events or moments that you've helped create, and what made them so special?
All the events that we do, I think, are memorable. We always try and go above and beyond what the client expects so that they walk away from that event feeling happy. And, so the last event we did was an annual award ceremony and celebration for a large global landscaping company. It was a pretty simple event. They had some stuff to go up on the screen. They had some quizzes and they had some games. And then at the end, we put a DJ on and, everyone got up and danced. We just went a little bit above and beyond in terms of the atmosphere for the end of the night. So we had a lot of extra lights in the room. So we turned it into a proper party and we put a load of graphics on the screen when the DJ was playing. And we just kind of elevated that atmosphere. And even though it's a small gesture, the client was just, absolutely delighted with that event and they had a really good time. There's a couple of specific events we've done recently that I was really pleased with. One was in Nuska Gardens at Jumeirah Beach Hotel, which essentially overlooks the Burj Al Arab. We did that back in January, so the weather was really nice. It was an outdoor dinner, but we built the screen and put the lights up and we provided all the entertainment for this event. It was a launch of a financial services product over here, Bahraini company, but they were launching in Dubai. But that again was just such a beautiful event. And obviously at nighttime, the Burj Al Arab is lit up and we matched all the colors with the company branding and then matched it with the Burj Al Arab colors. And it just looked absolutely fantastic.
It sounds brilliant. Really, really good. Now, you mentioned earlier that part of your vision is to change the industry to make a big impact. What is one piece of advice that you would give to someone wanting to break into the events or hospitality industry today?
Well, as I said, it's a very competitive market in Dubai. So I'd say the short answer is probably don't. Maybe go and try something else. If you're determined to get into this market and you see events as something that you're passionate about and you would enjoy, then I think you need to just find something to differentiate yourself from all the rest of the competition, because there are hundreds, if not thousands, of AV and events companies in Dubai all competing with each other. And as you said earlier, a big part of that is a race to the bottom. And you don't want to get caught into that trap where you're just going cheaper and cheaper and cutting your margins. So find something that you can specialize in, find something that's unique to you that will attract people to you. And then at that point, money doesn't become an issue because people are happy to spend more to get that unique service from you.
Excellent. I think that's really good advice. Looking ahead, what's next for you and Avenue? Do you have any exciting events, innovations, or expansions in the pipeline without giving away your 10-year plan?
We do. We have a lot. So one of the things we're focusing on this year is, rather than exclusively doing events for other people, we're starting to put on our own events. So we think this is a really good way of showcasing what we as a company can do. And if it's our own event, then it's entirely our vision, our creative direction that we want to go. So one example of that is we've just launched a new event or series of events, let's say. It's called La Bohemia. And La Bohemia essentially is a collision of art and dining. So we want to create these amazing experiences with the artistic vision of a contemporary artist, with an up-and-coming chef who's got some maybe new ideas. We don't want to go with somebody too established. So it's typically people who are not yet having a Michelin star, but they're on the way. And the chef and the artist together, alongside the venues that we select, will create these amazing experiences. And each one will be different. So we've got events coming up, currently booked in for Barcelona, London, and New York. And we're considering adding some other cities down the line. They'll be quite short-lived. Each event will only last 2 weeks. So there'll be maybe one event per evening for 2 weeks, and then it'll shut down, and then we'll move on to the next city. But it's just essentially a showcase of what we think Avenue2 can do, and highlighting how we can do things in different ways, let's say, than other people would.
Wow, that sounds really excellent. Exciting. It sounds challenging. I think setting up in different cities, it will each bring its own challenges. Well done. It sounds fantastic. And I wish you all the very best with these events that you're setting up yourself. It sounds really good.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. But essentially, you're probably familiar with the idea that Dubai essentially shuts down in the summer. So typically people who work in events, they disappear. Once it comes to about July, they leave Dubai, they'll go traveling, and then they might come back when the season opens up, let's say, September or October. But that gives you 2 or 3 months over the summer where nothing's happening. This idea was really born out of just trying to make the most of the summer.
And that makes sense for Europe too, where summer months are brilliant.
Exactly, yeah. So, I typically spend my summers in Europe anyway. So I thought, well, why not do something really fun? So that's where the idea for La Bohemia started.
Fantastic. It sounds really good. Now we've come to the segment of our show where I'll ask you some rapid fire questions, our version of a game show. Are you ready?
Sure.
One city that inspires your creative vision.
I'd have to go with Barcelona. On the creative side, I think with Gaudi and Picasso and all the other artists that had an influence on that city, the architecture, there's something just absolutely magical about Barcelona. I think it's a wonderful city.
A must-have element in any luxury event.
I think it's got to be the quality of the food and beverage. There's nothing worse than having an event where everything looks incredible, but then the food is very mediocre. I think it just ruins the whole thing. So good quality food, good quality drink, I think is absolutely key.
Coffee, tea, or champagne?
Oh, champagne, Bollinger.
Most challenging event you've ever managed?
Well, I probably shouldn't be too specific because I don't want to upset any clients. But we had an event in Dubai Expo recently, And I think it was a case of too many cooks spoil the broth. So too many people involved, too many opinions, and that became really challenging to manage. We got there in the end, but yeah, I think if you have too many people involved, it can really be a problem.
It sounds like that. In one word, how would you describe Avenue2?
Confident.
Oh, very good. What is one thing that you do every day, no matter how busy you get?
Go for a walk.
Oh, excellent. A good way to manage stress as well. I love it. Well, thank you for playing along. That was easy enough. Now, I would like to ask you our signature green poll question. Could you share an inspiring or life-changing experience that you have gone through, your green poll moment?
We touched on it earlier, but it was really that time back in 2015. So I'd climbed up to global director level in a multi-billion-dollar global company, and I felt pretty confident that my position was safe and that I was on a good trajectory, probably to end up in head office in the US at a sort of VP level at some point in my career. And then when the oil price dropped under $50 and I knew the company was panicking and I knew cuts were coming, I also knew that I worked in aftermarket, and typically in the oil and gas industry, aftermarket booms when the oil price is low because the customers don't want to spend a load of money on new equipment. They want to get the best out of their old equipment, through service, repair and spare parts. So I thought my position is completely safe. It was one of those things like in the movies where I showed up in the office and it was a case of they took my laptop, they took my phone, and they threw me out of the building, basically. And I was just thought, being treated like that after giving years to the company, I just never, ever wanted to be in that position again. So that was really the turning point where I decided that working for myself was going to be the way forward.
Yes, I can see how that would have certainly been a huge shock. And I think, as you say, I think lots of people have gone through similar experiences, whether it was the crash of 2008 or the oil and gas or COVID. I think lots of people suddenly come up to this realization that all of us are replaceable. And the only way is to build something for yourself.
Build something for yourself. And I guess you have to be adaptable. So many things where something throws a spanner in the works and something completely unexpected happens and the business you thought was safe is gone. You just have to be able to pivot and come up with something else or go in a different direction. And I've had to do that 4 or 5 times now. And it is challenging and it's tiring, but I think ultimately it's good for you. I think it makes you more resilient. It makes you grow as a person. It gives you more experience and understanding of the world and entrepreneurship, let's say. So yeah, there's been some tough times, but I think it's been good in the long run.
Yeah, not that the life of an entrepreneur is easy. It has its own challenges.
Yeah, I think often you see people who've done well. You can look at someone like Elon Musk and you see the private jets and all the trimmings of that successful lifestyle. He's been on the verge of bankruptcy many times. He almost bankrupted himself to get Tesla going, and then he almost bankrupted Tesla investing in SpaceX. He lost an enormous amount of money when he bought Twitter, which is now X. He's put everything on the line several times, and anything could have gone wrong, and he could have lost everything at any point. I think that's probably something that people don't see is the number of failures, because there must be so many people in the world who started businesses and not made it work and just ended up with nothing. So it is a risk. It is a challenge. I think for people who are driven into that lifestyle, it's the only way to do things.
I think that's such a good comment that you made there, because I interviewed somebody recently who said he's had 5 successful exits from companies. He says, but most people only know about the 5 successful exits. They don't know about the 99 that didn't work.
Yeah, exactly.
Your path is definitely evidence of that. You've tried so many different things, from starting out with a vision of being a pilot to going into, as you said, the oil and gas, but then trying police work, being a digital nomad, until you got into the luxury event space. So you've certainly tried lots of different things to find the thing that works for you. So your experience and what you shared with us is so inspiring. Certainly a masterclass in adaptability, innovation, and leadership. So thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us today.
You're very welcome, and that was very kind of you to say. Thank you so much.
Before we wrap up, where can our listeners learn more about you, Avenue2, and where can they connect with you?
So we have our website, which is avenue2.event. You can also find us on Instagram at avenue2.events. We're quite busy on Instagram. We post fairly frequently. And if you send us a message there, we will definitely respond.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Matrix Green Pill podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe. Please leave us a 5-star review We would so appreciate that. Until next time, keep dreaming big and creating unforgettable experiences.
If you enjoy our conversations, please like and subscribe. See you next Wednesday.